Hi, my name is Becky Wade, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my new romance called Let It Be Me. This is taken from chapter 2, and just to give you a little bit of backstory, the hero, Sebastian, had a car accident 6 months ago, and when he came to after being knocked out in the accident with a terrible concussion, there was a beautiful blonde woman in the car with him. She had seen him go off the road and she was coming to lend assistance. And he was completely dazzled by her, but he didn't ask her name and he hasn't been able to find her since. And now he's walking through a farmer's market on the property of the high school, and he hears a voice and it triggers his memory, and he is pretty sure that it's her voice. And that's where we'll pick up. He saw all ages and shapes of people, but not her. For weeks after his encounter with her, he'd racked his brain trying to think how he could learn her identity. Here's the book, by the way. He'd never seen her car. She'd been wearing nothing distinctive that would have allowed him to track her down. She'd left no trace behind. He'd contacted Misty River's 911 dispatcher and the EMTs to ask who she was. Neither had been willing to share her name. Privacy, they'd said. He'd hunted the social media feeds of his Misty River friends for a photo that included her. No success. He'd looked through old high school yearbooks trying to find her picture in one of Misty River High's graduating classes. No success. After a month of making himself crazy with frustration, he'd forced himself to quit searching. He told himself she could not be as appealing in real life as he'd made her in his imagination. Unfortunately, his brain hadn't listened. His body might have stopped the search, but he'd continued to brood over her for the past 6 months. To his left, he registered movement at one of the stalls. He glanced toward it in time to see a blonde head rise from behind buckets of flowers on risers. The woman extended a hand and poured change into a customer's palm. He could only see her profile, but that was enough. It was the woman from the day of the crash. His breath left him. Finally, amazingly, there she was. His awareness centered on her. He moved forward. She turned to chat with the 2 acne-prone teenagers helping her sell flowers. A piece of butcher paper reading "Support the Misty River High Math Club" hung in front of their folding table. He'd been wrong when he decided she could not be as appealing in real life as he'd made her in his imagination. She was ridiculously appealing, more so than he'd remembered. She had on a bright pink short sleeve sweater, the rounded collar of the snowy white shirt underneath folded over the neckline. Her jeans were beige, no wedding ring, very little makeup, hardly any jewelry at all, just tiny earrings and a classic metal watch. He stopped at her booth. She looked in his direction, and their eyes met. Finally, her. All right, that is the scene when these two reunite after having met months before. Anyway, thanks so much for enabling me to read a few pages from my new book to you. And if you have a chance to read it, I truly hope that you enjoy it. Thanks, everyone.